Thank you so much again. I really can't believe that my first video essay got over 50,000 views. I'm going to be traveling for the next 2 months, so I won't be posting, but if this does well, I'll definitely make more videos when I'm back home, so let me know what other topics you'd like to see covered. Louisa May Alcott originally intended to end Little Women after Meg and John became engaged, with the last line of part 1 reading, quote, "So the curtain falls upon Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy. Whether it ever rises again depends upon the reception given the first act of the domestic drama called Little Women," end quote. As we all know now, Alcott definitely got the reception that she was hoping for, likely even more positive than she'd ever imagined, which led her to write part 2. The second part of the story is a fairly stark contrast to part 1, not necessarily in terms of the narrative voice or overall writing style, but rather in terms of the conflicts that our main characters are faced with. Financial burdens, marriage, and, spoiler alert, even death. Greta Gerwig's 2019 adaptation employs a nonlinear structure to portray events that happen in part 1 with a very warm color grade in an effort to give that portion of the story a nostalgic glow. Gerwig explains her thought process at a director's roundtable discussion as follows.
I mean, the scene that I choose to sort of open my film with, I start with them as adults, and then childhood becomes a thing that you go back to because it was the last time everyone was together and that you were happy in this way and you felt like anything was possible, and adults have more limited options.
On the flip side, when showing the events of part 2, the adulthood portion of the story, Gerwig uses cooler, bluer, more realistic color grading. The scenes where this is most prevalent are when Beth is very sick in childhood, but recovers, contrasting with her death in adulthood. Gerwig uses this instance of clear parallels in the book to explain her decisions in creating this film.
And I wanted the sort of interplay of the time to be clear so you can follow it, but also in a way create this sense of everything's happening all at once. The biggest moment of that for me was the Beth death and Beth getting sick, and this sort of parallel. It's, it's all moving into one, and in these two realities, in this one she comes out alive, and in this one she doesn't. And I always thought that was the starkest contrast, too, between the magic of girlhood and the reality of adulthood. It felt like it also gave it this thing that people intuitively have when someone dies, which is that they say, but I just saw them. I just saw him. And it's almost as if presence could inoculate you from death. And, cinema is one of the art forms where you can literally have those two moments live next to each other, because that's how it feels in life, even though that's not how linear time works, unfortunately.
This contrast and use of parallels between scenes that happen years apart from one another lead the audience to reflect on their own memories of childhood, especially as they might compare to their current adult life. Gerwig also chose to portray a few important events that happen in part 2 of the novel with that warm childhood color grading, namely Meg's wedding and Laurie's marriage proposal to Jo. I believe that she did this because her narrative structure isn't concerned strictly with aligning childhood with the warm color grading precisely to part 1, but rather to all events that happen before the March sisters go their separate ways and truly venture off into adulthood. The events that were moved to the childhood portion of the film are there because they mark distinct moments of childhood's end. They serve as the final moments before the girls split up and truly become adults. For example, before Meg's wedding, Jo says, "Can't believe childhood is over." This line wasn't in the book, but I believe Gerwig uses it to parallel the final lines of Alcott's part 1, where a conversation between Laurie and Jo regarding Meg's engagement takes place. Jo says, quote, "It can never be the same again. I've lost my dearest friend," end quote. Laurie replies, quote, "You've got me anyhow. I'm not good for much, I know, but I'll stand by you, Jo, all the days of my life," end quote. This sentiment is, of course, kept in the film, and is the reason that Gerwig decided to portray the proposal scene as part of childhood. In her own words,
"They are each other's kind of androgynous other half." That's how they always felt to me. And the proposal scene, it's not just that Laurie wants to be with her and that she doesn't want to. It's that he's leaving childhood without her, that he's leaving that kind of pact that they never talked about.
Laurie's proposal is the last scene that occurs in childhood. It is, in this adaptation, literally the end of Joe's childhood. Literary scholar Holly Blackford supports this idea, writing that, quote, Alcott represents Laurie as the boyish Joe's counterpart. In the novel, the narrator remarks, quote, though nearly through college, Laurie was as much of a boy as ever, end quote. However, the focalizer here is Joe. Identifying him as a boy allows Joe to imagine him as a means to circumvent her development, which she resists, end quote. Blackford continues, quote, Joe reaches out for her boy both as self-mirror and as escape from the March world of Little Women. The motherless Laurie, who mirrors Joe in character and in the struggle between gender and social expectations, wishes admission to the sisterhood, end quote. Blackford argues that the two characters serve as a way for each individual to accept and embrace their inner resistance to gender roles. Quote, Joe and Laurie quickly reveal their alikeness, their distaste for social expectations and their given names, which embody gender expectations.
Miss March, isn't it?
Yes, Mr. Laurence, but I'm not Miss March. I'm only Joe.
And I'm not Mr. Laurence, I'm only Laurie.
And their inclinations for adventure abroad, end quote. They're an instant match, but not romantically, as audiences tend to expect from a heterosexual pairing. Instead, their compatibility was intended to be a subversion of societal norms, with Alcott herself noting that, quote, I won't marry Joe to Laurie to please anyone, end quote. Joe is desperately clinging on to the last moments of childhood, and Laurie's proposal is essentially a wake-up call for her. She's unable to pretend things can stay as they've always been, and feels betrayed by her best friend, her partner in crime, her androgynous other half, because he is taking a step in a direction that she's not yet ready to face. For a woman of the 1860s, adulthood means one thing above all else: marriage. This is something Joe spends the entire story raging against.
I want to get married.
Why?
Because I love him.
You will be bored of him in 2 years, and we will be interesting forever.
Teddy, I don't believe I will ever marry. I'm happy as I am, and I love my liberty too well to be in any hurry to give it up.
Which Laurie, of course, knows, leading to deeper feelings of betrayal in Joe. But Joe is a safe space for Laurie. He can be a bit more feminine around her, and she can be boyish around him. In marriage, they would not only be each other's safe spaces, but Laurie would also gain access to the sisterhood of the Marches, as Holly Blackford put it. He would finally be an official member of the family of women that he yearns so deeply to be a part of. Laurie's primary motivation, though, boils down to expectations.
And I failed.
Why does everyone expect
can't.
it then? Why does your family and my grandpa expect it? Why are you saying this? Say yes. Let's be happy together, Joe.
I can't say yes truly, so I'm not going to say it at all.
Joe's never cared for expectations, which, coupled with her inability to take that step to adulthood at this time, is why she ultimately rejects him. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought in the comments. And again, if this does well, I'd love to make more of these types of videos when I'm back from my trip, which will be in about 2 months. Let me know what else you'd like to see, other adaptations, films, books, literally whatever. Thanks so much again.